David Seymour is the ACT Party leader. David, how are you?
Great, thanks.
David, let's start with privatisation because that's one of the big themes of your speech. What do you want to sell?
I don't think it's a big theme of my speech. I see as soon as you mention the P word, people get completely hooked on it. I just make the point in my speech that New Zealand's at a tipping point, 116,000 people leaving. That's 2% of the population. That's early 1980s kind of numbers, highest numbers on record according to Stats NZ. We need to start asking bigger questions, like the government owns $570 billion worth of assets, and yet we can't afford the core infrastructure in cities to build more homes for the next generation. Now, do we need to ask ourselves, do we own the right stuff? So I'm not there to tell you exactly what to sell. I'm just there to say, over the next year or two, we're going to have to start asking some bigger questions. Otherwise, people are going to keep leaving. And the net result of that politically is we end up with a majority for mediocrity.
I think that, cases like Landcorp and TVNZ, there are clear cases to be made for the sale of some assets. Isn't your problem going to be if you have to get back in bed with Winston? He doesn't want any of this to happen.
Well, ultimately, it won't be about any politician. It will be about, do we want to remain a first world country that attracts and retains the people that grow up here with first world expectations? Because we're at a tipping point. Things are going to get better this year thanks to lower interest rates, and that's welcome, and the government's doing a lot of hard work on that. But cast your mind out a few years, we're at a point where if we don't make this place more attractive to stay, then the people who are motivated leave. And that's where I talk about that majority for mediocrity. It's not far off. I'll be voting for Chloe Swarbrick, who says your problems are caused by someone else. And if you vote for me, I'll tax their house to solve your problems. It won't work, but it sounds good.
You talk about the public service and you, in the election, promised to cut 14,000 public sector jobs. We're nowhere near that number, and we've still got the likes of the Ministry for Women around, which you promised to get rid of. How are you going to convince National to go further with that if you haven't already?
I think it's ultimately the circumstances that persuade people. The ACT Party's pretty clear on where it stands. We published a fully costed alternative budget every year in opposition. We said there's no point in these ministries. There's no point in these extra 16,000 people. You can probably guess we make those arguments within government, and I'd say the government hasn't gone as far as we'd go, but it has gone further than it would go without us. The next thing that changes is, as people recognise, we've got official cut bait in this country. It's not good enough just to say that everything's fixed. It's not. We've got a huge amount of work to do.
Have we caught you on a run, David? Sounds like you're a little breathless.
No, I'm walking. If it sounds like I'm running, I must be even less fit than I realise.
Hey, we're all allowed a little leeway in the new year. Health and education, you talk about those. We spend a lot on individuals. You've broken the cost down per person, and you're saying, well, maybe we should just give you the cash.
Yeah, I think, again, it's an example of the kind of bigger thinking that we need if we want to make this whole dream of a first world country, island paradise kind of thing work out. And I just make the observation, $30 billion on health. 5 years ago, it was $20 billion. So, we've gone up $10 billion in the last 5 years. And yet health is one of, if not the biggest political issues these days. Clearly what we're doing is not working. I see Shane Reddy move on. On paper, he's probably the best health minister we've ever had, and he couldn't make it work. So I just say to people, look, $30 billion, 5 million people, do the maths, that's $6,000 each. How many people, if I said, you have the option of saying no more entitlement to publicly funded healthcare, but here's $6,000 that you can take to a private insurance company, I think a lot of people might say, well, we need to explore that option. What would the rules be around it? Obviously the healthcare companies would have to take any patient that applied. They couldn't reject anyone. And I know there'll be people saying, this guy's nuts, it's privatisation, it's a secret conspiracy out of Washington, D.C. Well, actually, what I'm describing is not too far off the way they do healthcare in France.
David Seymour, thank you very much for your time this morning.